They say life can change in a single heartbeat. For Anthony, a man who once walked through fire to save others, it was a single moment that turned his world into ashes. Anthony had always been more than just a firefighter. He was a hero in every sense of the word. His colleagues admired his courage, his neighbors respected his kindness, and his family adored the strength he carried in his heart. He had built his life around protecting others, and to him, nothing was more sacred than duty. But duty came at a heavy price. One evening, the alarm rang louder than usual. A family was trapped inside a burning building, and Anthony didn't think twice before charging into the flames. His instincts guided him, his muscles remembered the training, and his heart gave him the courage to carry a little girl out of the smoke-filled house. She was saved, but in the final moments of the rescue, a collapsing beam struck him down. The world faded into darkness. When Anthony awoke in a hospital bed, surrounded by sterile walls and the beeping of machines, the reality hit him like a thunderstorm. His legs were crushed beyond repair. The doctors, with voices heavy with regret, told him he might never walk again. The words felt like a death sentence, not for his life, but for the man he used to be. Alina, his wife, was there when he opened his eyes. At first, Anthony thought her trembling hands and forced smile were signs of worry and care. But over the days that followed, he noticed the shift. Her eyes no longer lingered on him with love. Instead, they scanned the hospital room with impatience. Her sighs were longer, her visits shorter, and her silence spoke volumes. Anthony wanted to believe love could withstand this storm. He told himself that she was simply tired, overwhelmed by the shock. Yet, late at night, when the machines hummed and the world was quiet, he could feel the distance growing. When he was finally discharged and confined to a wheelchair, the battle truly began. The once vibrant home filled with laughter and warmth now echoed with tension. Anthony tried to remain the man he once was, strong, hopeful, and determined. He spent his days reassuring his daughter, Serena, that everything would be fine, even when his own heart was drowning in despair. She believed him because to her, her father was still the hero who had once carried her on his shoulders, still the man who told her bedtime stories with a voice that made her feel safe. But Alina's heart was no longer his. To her, the wheelchair was not just metal and wheels. It was a cage, a reminder of the life she no longer wanted. She was young, beautiful, and restless, and she saw no future in standing beside a man who could not even stand for himself. The first time Anthony caught her staring at her phone with a secretive smile, his heart sank. The late-night calls she dismissed as work, the sudden trips to the store that lasted hours, the perfume he didn't recognize. His instincts whispered the truth he refused to accept. Still, he remained silent. For Serena's sake, he held his pain inside, convincing himself that maybe it was just his imagination. But deep down, he knew the storm was no longer coming. It was already here. Then, one evening, when the house was quiet, Anthony overheard a conversation that shattered him completely. Alina's voice, soft and playful, floated through the half-closed door as she spoke on the phone. Words like "a real man," "he can't give me what I deserve," and "I can't waste my life on him," pierced his heart like daggers. He sat there in his wheelchair, hands trembling, his soul breaking into pieces. For the first time since the accident, Anthony felt truly powerless, not because of his broken legs, but because the woman he had loved with every beat of his heart had already abandoned him in spirit. Serena, too young to understand the complexities of betrayal, sensed the tension. She clung to her father more than ever, her innocent questions cutting deeper wounds. "Daddy, will you come to my school for Father's Day? Will Mommy come with us together, like before?" Anthony smiled through his pain and promised he would, even though he knew Alina's heart was already elsewhere. That night, as the rain lashed against the windows, Anthony stared into the darkness and asked himself the question no man ever wants to face. Was love not strong enough to survive when life turned cruel? Anthony didn't know it yet, but the woman he trusted most was about to make a decision that would not only destroy their marriage, but also tear apart the fragile world of their innocent daughter. When love begins to fade, it doesn't vanish all at once. It crumbles piece by piece, leaving behind silent ruins only the heart can see. The days that followed were a blur of pretense and broken promises. Anthony woke up every morning determined to believe things would get better. He told himself Alina simply needed time, that the weight of his accident was heavy on her shoulders too, and she would eventually come back to him with the same warmth she once had. But reality has a way of stripping illusions bare. Alina's restlessness grew more obvious with each passing day. She no longer sat beside him during dinner. Instead, she scrolled endlessly through her phone, laughter escaping her lips at messages Anthony would never see. She avoided his eyes, her smile reserved for strangers rather than the man who once made her world complete. For Anthony, every moment felt like a reminder of how powerless he had become, not just in body, but in love. Yet, Serena noticed, children often see what adults try to hide. She would watch her mother walk out of the house with excuses too flimsy to be real. "I'll be back in an hour," Alina would say, but the hours stretched into nights, and Serena would climb onto her father's lap, resting her tiny head on his chest. "Don't worry, Daddy," she whispered once. "I'll always be here." Those words, so innocent and pure, were both a comfort and a wound. Anthony's heart swelled with love for his daughter, but deep down he wondered if her childhood was being stolen by circumstances she could never understand. The breaking point came when Serena's school announced its annual Father's Day program. It was an event where fathers were invited to spend the day with their children, sharing stories, laughter, and pride. Serena's eyes lit up with excitement. She begged both her parents to attend, dreaming of a day where her family could feel whole again. Anthony promised he would be there. He wanted nothing more than to sit beside his daughter, to show her that despite his wheelchair, he was still her father, still her protector, still the man she could be proud of. But when he asked Alina to join them, her reaction cut him deeper than any wound he had ever suffered in the line of duty. "Do you want our daughter to be laughed at?" she snapped, her voice dripping with disdain. "Do you want her classmates to point and whisper because her father can't even stand on his own 2 feet?" Anthony sat in silence, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair, his knuckles turning white. He had faced roaring flames and collapsing buildings, but nothing had ever hurt as much as hearing the woman he loved speak of him with such cruelty. Serena overheard part of the conversation, her innocent face clouded with confusion. "Why would anyone laugh at Daddy?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What's wrong with being in a wheelchair?" Alina's sigh filled the room, heavy with impatience. "You don't understand now, but someday you will," she muttered, brushing past her daughter. Anthony's heart broke, not for himself, but for Serena. He saw the tears she fought to hide, the questions in her eyes that no child should have to carry. That night, as she slept curled up in her bed, Anthony wheeled himself quietly into her room, watching her chest rise and fall with the peace only children know. He whispered a promise to her sleeping form, a vow that no matter what happened between him and Alina, he would never abandon her. But Alina's betrayal was only just beginning. Anthony soon discovered that she wasn't merely unhappy. She had found comfort elsewhere. A neighbor, a man with smooth words and promises of luxury, had become her escape. She confided in him about her frustrations, about her desire for a life free from responsibility. To him, she wasn't the wife of a disabled man. She was a woman who could be flattered, pursued, and stolen away. Anthony learned of their secret meetings through whispers in the neighborhood and the faint scent of cologne that clung to Alina's clothes. Each discovery was another dagger in his already broken heart. Still, he remained silent, not out of weakness, but because of Serena. He couldn't bear to let his daughter's world collapse so suddenly. But silence has its limits. One evening, as the sun set and shadows stretched across the walls of their home, Anthony overheard Alina once again. This time, her voice was not just restless, it was decisive. She spoke of divorce, of freedom, of a life where she no longer had to care for a man who, in her words, could offer nothing. Anthony sat frozen, the words echoing in his mind. His life, once built on courage and sacrifice, now felt like a prison. He had saved strangers without hesitation, yet the woman he saved his love for couldn't even find the strength to stand by him. As the night deepened, Anthony realized that his marriage was already gone. What he didn't know was that Alina's next decision would not just shatter him, but also threaten to take Serena away from him forever. Betrayal doesn't always arrive like a storm. It slips in quietly, until one day, You realize the person standing beside you has already left. Anthony had always known Alina was restless, but he still clung to a fragile hope that she might change her mind, that her vows meant more than the allure of a new life. But hope has its limits, and his was fading fast. Alina stopped pretending. Her late-night absences turned into entire weekends away, explained by vague excuses about work projects and friends in need. She no longer bothered to cook meals, no longer asked if Anthony had taken his medication, and no longer offered even the smallest gesture of care. One evening, Anthony wheeled himself into the kitchen, hoping to find her preparing dinner, but the counters were bare. A note sat on the table instead, her handwriting quick and careless. "Don't wait up. I'll be late." No explanation, no apology, just absence. Serena was the one who felt it most. She would sit at the window long after sunset, waiting for her mother to return, her small hands gripping the curtain tightly. Each time Alina walked through the door with a distracted smile and a phone buzzing in her pocket, Serena's face would light up with joy, only to dim again when she realized her mother had no time for her. Anthony tried to fill the void. He became both father and mother, helping Serena with her homework, telling her stories at night, and cooking meals from his wheelchair despite the pain. But he could not erase the shadow of Alina's absence. Children, no matter how resilient, always feel the absence of love. Then came the moment Anthony had feared most. One afternoon, Serena returned from school with her eyes swollen from tears. When he asked her what was wrong, she hesitated, then whispered, "The kids laughed at me today. They said my mom doesn't love my dad anymore." Anthony's heart shattered. No child should have to carry such cruel words, and yet his daughter bore them with a courage beyond her years. He pulled her close, promising her that no matter what anyone said, she was loved deeply by him, by the very heart that refused to stop beating for her. But Alina was already building a life outside their home. The whispers Anthony had ignored became truths he could no longer deny. Neighbors spoke cautiously of her frequent visits to a man who lived nearby, a man known for his charm and wealth. Anthony didn't need to ask questions. The answers were in Alina's eyes when she looked at him with boredom, and in her smile when she left the house dressed in clothes he hadn't seen before. One night, as Serena slept soundly in her room, Anthony overheard the final confirmation. Alina's voice, soft but sharp, carried through the hallway as she spoke on the phone. She laughed, a sound he hadn't heard directed at him in years. "Yes," she said, "soon everything will be over. The papers are ready. I just can't wait to be free." Anthony sat in the darkness, his hands trembling on the wheels of his chair. He had faced flames and collapsing walls without fear, but now his heart was consumed by something fiercer than any fire, the fear of losing his daughter. He could endure the loss of love, but the thought of Serena growing up in a broken home tore at him like claws. The following week, Alina made no effort to hide her intentions. She returned home one evening with a stack of papers in her hand, divorce papers. She placed them on the table with a cold smile. "It's time," she said simply. "I can't waste my life like this. I deserve better." Anthony stared at the papers, the words blurring before his eyes. His hands shook as he tried to grasp the pen, but he couldn't bring himself to sign. Not yet. Not while Serena's future was at stake. Alina's eyes narrowed. "Don't drag this out," she warned. "If you won't let me go peacefully, I'll take Serena with me. And believe me, you won't be able to stop me." Her threat echoed in his mind long after she stormed out of the room. For the first time since his accident, Anthony felt a surge of determination. He may have lost his strength, his ability to walk, even his wife's love, but he would not lose his daughter. That night, he sat by Serena's bedside, watching her sleep peacefully. Her small hand rested against his, warm and trusting. In that moment, Anthony made a silent vow. He would fight with everything he had left, not for himself, but for her. Alina believed she had already won, that her freedom was within reach. But Anthony was about to discover a truth that would change the course of their lives forever and give him a strength she never imagined he still had. Sometimes, just when life pushes you to the edge, fate whispers that the story isn't over yet. The divorce papers sat on the table like a cruel reminder of everything Anthony had lost. Each day, Alina grew bolder in her betrayal, no longer bothering to hide the late-night calls, the secret meetings, or the careless words that cut deeper than knives. She believed Anthony had become powerless, trapped in a wheelchair, with nothing left to fight for. But Alina had underestimated him. One morning, while Serena was at school and Alina was gone again, Anthony wheeled himself into the hospital for a follow-up appointment. The same sterile hallways, the same cold smell of disinfectant. It all reminded him of the day he was told he might never walk again. He braced himself for another round of hopeless words. Yet this time, the doctor surprised him. After a series of new tests, he looked Anthony in the eye and said, "You are not paralyzed. Your spine is intact. Your legs are severely injured, but with therapy and determination, you can walk again." The word stunned him. It felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. All this time, he had been told his life was over, but now, a spark of hope returned. The road ahead would be long, painful, and uncertain, but for the first time since the accident, Anthony felt alive again. He didn't tell Alina. Not yet. He carried this secret like a shield, protecting it close to his chest. He wanted to grow stronger quietly, to rise again when no one expected it. Every morning, after Alina left the house, he pushed himself through grueling exercises. His muscles screamed in protest, sweat drenched his body, and at times he thought he would collapse. But every drop of pain reminded him of the promise he had made. To Serena, to himself, to the man he used to be. Meanwhile, Serena became his source of strength. Her laughter, her questions, her small hands helping him carry things around the house. They gave him courage. She didn't see him as broken. To her, he was still her hero, and that belief was enough to keep him moving forward. But Alina's betrayal grew darker. She began openly speaking of her new life, bragging about the man who could give her the luxuries she deserved. She no longer treated Anthony as a husband, not even as a human being. At times, her cruelty spilled over to Serena, snapping at her for small mistakes, brushing off her tears as if they were inconveniences. One evening, Alina returned home after yet another secret meeting. Her perfume filled the air, unfamiliar and sharp. Serena rushed to greet her, arms outstretched, but Alina brushed past her coldly. Anthony watched, anger burning inside him. "How long are you going to keep pretending you're still part of this family?" he asked quietly. Alina's laugh was bitter. "This family," she sneered. "There is no family. There's just you, a broken man, and a child clinging to dreams that will never come true. I'm done pretending." Her words stung, but Anthony stayed silent. He had learned that silence could be more powerful than shouting. Alina mistook his quietness for defeat, but in truth, he was gathering strength. The turning point came with Serena's school event. The Father's Day program she had begged both her parents to attend. Anthony had promised her he would be there, no matter what. Alina, however, scoffed at the idea. "Do you want our daughter to be humiliated?" she said. "Do you want the world to laugh at her because her father rolls in on wheels?" Her cruelty only fueled his determination. Anthony knew he wasn't ready to walk yet, but he also knew that showing up for Serena mattered more than anything. He would face the stares, the whispers, the pity. None of it mattered as long as Serena saw him there, proudly by her side. The night before the event, Serena tiptoed into his room. "Daddy, are you sure you'll come?" she asked softly. Anthony smiled, hiding his pain. "I'll be there, princess. I promise." As she hugged him tightly, Alina watched from the doorway, her face unreadable. She believed Anthony was making a fool of himself, clinging to responsibilities he could no longer fulfill. To her, he was already forgotten, replaced by the man waiting for her outside. But Alina had no idea that the ground beneath her was about to shift. For while she was busy chasing illusions of wealth and pleasure, Anthony was quietly preparing for a comeback that would shock her to the core. The next morning, as Serena's school filled with laughter and fathers proudly standing beside their children, Anthony wheeled himself through those doors, unaware that the truth about Alina's betrayal was about to explode in the most public way possible. Every betrayal eventually comes to light, sometimes in the place you least expect it. The morning of Serena's school program arrived with a heavy tension in the air. Anthony dressed carefully, choosing his best suit even though his body still ached. His hands trembled slightly as he buttoned his shirt, but his resolve was firm. He had promised Serena he would be there, and he would keep that promise. Serena beamed with pride as she held his hand on the way to school. "Daddy, everyone will see how brave you are," she whispered. Her faith in him was unshakable, and it gave him courage. Alina, however, was distant. She hadn't wanted to come but decided at the last moment, only because she knew her lover would also be at the event. He was a wealthy businessman whose child attended the same school. To Alina, this was the perfect chance to flaunt her new life. The school auditorium buzzed with excitement. Fathers sat proudly with their children, laughter echoing through the halls. As Anthony wheeled himself inside, whispers rippled across the room. Some parents looked at him with pity, others with respect. He ignored them all, his eyes focused only on Serena's glowing smile. The program began with cheerful songs and dances. When it was Serena's turn to perform, she stood confidently on stage, her small voice ringing out. "My daddy is my hero. He's strong, he's brave, and no matter what happens, he never gives up." Tears welled in Anthony's eyes. The room grew silent, touched by the innocence of her words. But for Alina, the moment was unbearable. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her gaze darting to the man sitting across the hall, her lover. The final part of the program was a family activity, where fathers and mothers were invited on stage with their children. Serena tugged at Anthony's arm eagerly. "Come, Daddy." Anthony wheeled himself forward, determination etched on his face. He may not have been able to walk yet, but he was there, and that was enough. The audience clapped in support. For a brief moment, he felt whole again. But then, chaos struck. As the children led their parents onto the stage, Alina's lover also rose, his own child running ahead of him. Alina froze, her eyes locked with his, and suddenly, the secret she had kept so carefully hidden stood exposed under the glaring lights. Parents began whispering, recognizing the familiarity between them. The lover's wife, sitting in the crowd, gasped in shock, her face pale with realization. And then, like a storm breaking, the truth unraveled. The wife stood up, pointing a trembling finger at Alina. You've been meeting my husband behind our backs." The auditorium erupted. Gasps, murmurs, judgmental stares. It was as if the walls themselves had turned against Alina. She tried to deny it, stammering, but the evidence was undeniable. Her lover's guilty face confirmed everything. Anthony sat silently, his hands gripping the arms of his wheelchair. He had suspected betrayal, but watching it exposed so publicly was both painful and strangely liberating. The mask Alina had worn for so long was gone, torn away in front of everyone. Serena, confused and frightened, clutched Anthony's arm. "Daddy, what's happening?" she whispered. Anthony pulled her close. "Nothing for you to worry about, princess. Just remember, I'll always be here for you." Alina's world crumbled that day. Parents turned their backs on her. Teachers whispered about her shamelessness, and her lover walked away, unwilling to face the consequences. She was left standing alone in the spotlight, disgraced. That night, back at home, she tried to plead with Anthony. "It wasn't what it looked like," she lied, her voice desperate. "I was lonely. I made mistakes, but we can fix this." Anthony looked at her calmly, his voice steady. "Fix this? You broke not just our marriage, Alina. You broke Serena's heart. You showed her that betrayal is stronger than loyalty. But I will never let her believe that." With those words, he handed her the divorce papers she had once mocked. This time, he was the one who wanted freedom. Alina's hands shook as she realized she had lost everything. Her husband, her daughter's trust, and even the man she had risked it all for. She had gambled love for lust and ended up with nothing. Weeks passed. Anthony focused on his therapy, his strength returning day by day. Serena remained his greatest cheerleader, clapping every time he managed to take a step with support. The bond between father and daughter grew unbreakable, built on trust, love, and resilience. And then, one morning, the impossible happened. With trembling legs but unwavering spirit, Anthony stood up without support. Tears filled his eyes as he took his first independent steps towards Serena, who screamed with joy, "Daddy, you're walking." In that moment, Anthony knew he had won, not just against the accident, not just against Alina's betrayal, but against despair itself. Love built on lies will always collapse, but love built on truth, like that between a father and his child, can survive anything.